So, guys, in our previous session, we had already set up all our Splunk instances where we set up all the search heads, indexes, heavy forwarders, universal forwarders for both Linux and Windows environment, and a single Linux instance for deploy, cluster master, and deployment server. So now we'll be discussing on and seeing in live like how we are going to configure each of the instances in order for them to perform their roles. Okay, so basically in our further sessions we'll be going through a bottom to top approach first, where will be setting up our forwarding tier, then the indexer clustering tier, then the search head tier. Okay. So that being said now, so let's focus on the forwarding tier right now. So in that forwarding tier, so we have totally four instances to configure. Okay. So three are the universal forwarder one, two Linux and Windows, and a heavy forwarder, and then a deployment server. So for that, that is a part of a single machine that we need to configure. Okay. So basically the roles of this particular four things will be: the universal forwarders are the end agents, right, which are installed in the systems, so which will be grabbing logs from a particular locations, and they will be forwarding to the heavy forwarders. Okay, so heavy forwarders are like a big Splunk instances, so they can carry big logs, but they won't be storing it, and they will be forwarding those logs again to indexes. Okay, right, so that is the first two flows. So the universal forwarders will be grabbing the logs, and it will be sending to heavy forwarders, and the heavy forwarders will be grabbing the logs and sending it to the indexes, right? And now the next thing is the deployment server, right? So deployment server is like a manager for all these forwarders. Okay, so basically the main role is for the deployment server is to push configuration files or applications to this particular three instances or the forwarders. Okay, so that is the role of the deployment server. So in Splunk, we call everything as apps. Okay, so if you hear a app, so app is nothing but configuration file in Splunks. Okay, so there will be everything that the deployments will server will be pushing to these three servers. It will be in the form of the applications. So basically those applications will contain the configurations. Okay, so in the first configuration we'll be setting up the universal forwarder in order to send the logs to the heavy forwarder. Okay, and the heavy forwarder will be sending the logs to the indexer. So these will be two separate configurations. Okay, so let us go through a document that I have created where I have mentioned everything which is needed in order for our course. Okay, so one more thing that I forgot to mention, guys. So one more thing is, first of all, this deployment server, a universal forwarder, heavy forwarder should be communicating with the deployment server. Okay, so in order to the deployment server to push apps to this particular servers. Okay, so they first should report to the deployment server, and in order to do so, there is a very important configuration file which is known as deployment client.conf. So we call it as deployment client.conf file. So where it will be present inside opt splunk and etc system local. So by default it won't be present there. If it is present there, then we can update the configuration. If it is not present there, we need to create it from scratch. Okay, so this, if we go to the Splunk official document, okay, so we'll see here complete configurations of the deployment client, like what are the properties available with this particular file. Okay, so we'll see global settings, all everything. So but basically, so I have only selected those configurations that is essential for this tutorial. Okay, even you will get a deployment client.conf.example. It is the same for all the configuration files. Okay, so basically you will see here what are the important configurations, or how some few examples like how you can set up the deployment client.conf file. Now coming to the use of deployment client.conf file, this configuration file is generally will be present inside the forwarders which are going to report to the deployment server, right, guys? So they are going to, once again I am repeating, they are going to contain the configurations for reporting to the deployment server. Okay, so basically, so these the brackets which you see, these are called stanzas in configuration files. Okay, so deployment client means we are stating that it is a deployment client. Okay, target broker, like we have to target broker in the sense whom it is going to deploy, that is it is going to report, it is going to be a deployment server, and then the URI or the IP address or anything. so to where it is going to report. So that is basically the configuration of the deployment client.conf. And where it should be present, it should be present inside the opt splunk etc system local and deployment client.conf configuration file. So coming back to our architecture diagram, so this configuration file should be present inside all these three: heavy forwarders, universal forwarders, and universal forwarder windows. So then you'll be able to see this particular three instances reporting to the deployment server. So let's quickly see that how it happens. Now, coming back to my, okay. So now as I'm going to work on the deployment server right now, let's quickly log into the deployment server. Okay, so the Splunk instance which we have initiated for the deployment server. So we'll be logging into that. So now once we log in here, guys, go to settings and go to forwarder management. Okay, so this is where the deployment server, see the URL, it shows deployment server. So here where all the configurations, everything will be present in the UI. You can do it from the UI as well, but we'll be proceeding with the configuration file. Everything will be will be doing it from the backend. So as of now, you see right in the deployment server, when I click that, nothing it is showing, right? Because there are no clients or anything which is reporting to this particular thing. So first of all, what we are going to do, we are going to deploy this particular configurations on the on our three of the forwarders. Okay, so let's quickly do that. Just need to make sure that all the machines are connected, right? So my Windows machine, this is also even connected to the network. So now what we will do, okay, once that is being done, now let's quickly log into our deployment server. Sorry, not the deployment server. Let's start with our heavy forwarder. Okay, so let me grab the IP address of this heavy forwarder. I'll come root here. So now if we go back to this document, we need to go to this particular path, guys. OPT Splunk etc system local. Okay. Okay. So if you see ls, there is no configuration file like that. So what I will do, I will create a configuration file in that name. Okay. Now once that is done, just copy and paste this particular configurations what you have created. Save it. Now what you have to do, once that is done, now you have to restart your Splunk. Okay. So our heavy forwarder is restarted, and we have able to deploy. We have make the configuration changes as well. So now this is my deployment server URL. So let me quickly reload and check whether I'm able to see that particular heavy forwarder in the list or not. So let's wait for some time. Right, so there is a small change that have we have to do in the configuration file. So because of that, it was not reporting. Instead, you previously saw, right, it was having only the IP address. So what I have changed it should be a complete URL, HTTPS colon backslash backslash, then the IP address, then colon the port. The same configuration changes even I have done in the deployment client dot conf as well. Okay, so the target URI instead of the IP address, it should be the complete URL. Once that is done, so this was the changes made in the recent update of the Splunk. So once that is done, if you restart, you are going to see here, this panel is going to come up. Okay, so this panel generally shows, if you see here, so as of now we are seeing this clients. So one client is particular right now reporting to this particular for a deployment server, so which is the same 172.31.44.251, which is the same IP address of where we configured the deployment client. So this shows that we have successfully deployed we have deployed client successfully. Okay, so as of now we are seeing zero server classes. So these are we are going to discuss it in the further lecture. Okay, so that is being done now. So we what we are going to do, we are going to now deploy the same thing in for the universal forwarder as well. Okay. So now the path a little bit it changes. Instead of Splunk, it becomes Splunk Forwarder. Okay. So before starting, let's check whether Splunk is running or not. We can check it by typing Splunk dot backslash Splunk status. So what you can do, if it is not starting, just type it's not running dot backslash Splunk to start. That being done. Now what we are going to do, cd slash opt slash Splunk or forwarder etc system and local. Okay, so now here we are going to deploy that particular configuration file. Okay. So same thing, same configuration should be pasted here as well. Okay, that being done, just save this. Now what you have to do, you just need to restart this particular Splunk forwarder dot backslash Splunk restart. Okay. Once that is done, now in some time you will be able to see a second client being reporting here. Okay, so let's try to restart, reload our page. So in few minutes we'll be able to see even the second client as well. See guys, if you can see, there is a second client being reported right now. So 35.78. It's the same universal forwarder where we have set up our deployment, right? So that being done now the last thing remains is we are going to do the same thing for our Windows Universal Forwarder. So Universal Forwarder is configured here in my system itself. So what we will do, we have to go to C drive, go to program files, then go to Splunk Universal Forwarder, etc, then go to system, local. Okay, in this particular location, you need to create one more document which is called as deployment client.conf. Fine. Once that is done, paste the same configurations here as well. Now, once that is done, what you can do is just go to Splunk bin path, and what you have to do, you just need to restart this particular Splunk. Make sure, guys, you run this command as administrator. Okay, so let's wait for some time now, and we'll be able to see even the third client reporting as well. Right, guys, see, even our third machine is also reporting. So the name of my machine is like this. So that's why we are able to see. So let's confirm it with my IP address. If I go here and I config, sorry, IP config, I'm not able to see it from the IP config. Let us see from this particular. Uh, instance only. So once we are connected from the open VPN, we are going to see our IP address like this 172.227.232.14, right? The same IP address, even we are able to see it here as well. Fine. Once that is done, now what we can do, now we need to know two more important concepts, right? Apps and server classes. So what are these two things that we need to understand? So basically, apps are nothing but the configuration files which are going to be pushed to the deployment client. So deployment clients are these particular three machines. So where we are going to actually forward our logs. Understood? So that is where that is what it is. Okay. And so we need to create these particular apps in the deployment server itself, and those apps will be again pushed to the clients. That will be done even by the deployment server. So that is what the functionality of deployment server is. So, so for that same thing, I have even created two things, right? So coming back to our architecture diagram, so we need to have two apps. Okay, so one app will be for universal forwarders, and one app should be for the heavy forwarders. So in that particular app of universal forwarder, what it will do, it is we are going to mention the configuration like, hey, universal forwarder, you the logs which you are getting, you need to forward it to the heavy forwarder, and the app which will be belonging to the heavy forwarder, we need to mention that the logs which you are getting from wherever, you need to send those logs, every each and every logs to the indexer. So that's what the configuration will be. So let me quickly explain you. So basically, now this particular app should be created in the deployment server itself. Okay, that's the first and important thing to note. And it should be created inside the deployment apps. Okay, inside the location opt splunk etc, sorry, apps and deployment apps, sorry, etc and then deployment apps, that is fine. And inside, and then we need to create a folder called uf forwarding app, and then a local folder we need to create, and inside that we need to create an important file which is known as outputs.conf. So this particular file you might have already seen in our standalone deployment. Let me show you this particular configuration file in Splunk documentation as well. So this particular Splunk document will contain each and every details about the configuration file. So basically, so this particular configuration file tells us like how the forwarder needs to send the data, like where to send, how to send. So those all every properties will be mentioned here. Even you can read out all the important properties which are here. And also if you can use the by default the basic TCP configurations, the examples as well for this particular thing. Okay, so the most important configuration which is needed for us, I have created it already, and we can use this particular thing as well. Okay, so this particular configuration what you're able to see in the screen right now, so this is configuration will be for forwarding universal forwarder data to the heavy forwarder, right? So this configuration mentions, so this is a stanza called TCP out where we need to mention the name. Okay, so what is the name of that particular group? So we are creating a group here. I have named it as HF. So HF in the sense I've named it as heavy forward. Okay, so then we need to mention the same group inside the TCP out HF. Then we need to mention the server where it needs to forward the logs and the port number, right? So as we know, coming back to the architecture, the universal forwarder needs to forward the logs to the heavy forwarder. So we need to mention the IP address of the heavy forwarder. Now, if I go back to my EC2 instances and if I click on the heavy forwarder, so this is the IP address of my heavy forwarder. So that's how it is configured. Now, now coming back to the configuration file. So now there should be app even for the heavy forwarder as well. So I have named it as HF forwarding app. So the name what you will be giving to that particular folder, the same name the apps will also be getting be will be getting created, right? So what we have to do is we have to create the same particular app again, but the configuration file changes, right? So here the same file will be there, outputs.conf, as it needs to forward the logs. So for forwarding the logs, it's the configuration file is called outputs.conf, right? So once that is done, inside the configuration file, you have to mention the server names where it needs to forward, right? So it basically it needs to forward the logs to the indexes, right? So it can pick up the indexes based on the load balancing. Heavy forwarder has that capability, right? So it can do it on its own. So but we need to mention the IP address of all the indexes what is available to us, right? So we have these indexes which are available to us. So let me quickly show you. So it can pick a indexer according to its need, and it can send the logs, right? So this is my first indexer 138, so I mentioned it here. Indexer 2, the private IP address of the indexer 2 233, even I have mentioned it there here. And indexer 3 227. So that is also done, right? So this is the configuration file that we need to deploy in the deployment server, that we need to create, actually not deploy. So let's quickly do that. Once we are here, just go to your terminal. So now what you have to do is we have to log into our deployment server, right? So let's quickly get the IP address of the deployment server. So I've logged into my deployment server now. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to that particular path, cd opt splunk etc. Now you see here one folder is there, right? Deployment apps. So we have to go to this particular folder, right? So now here we need to create our folder. So the folder name what you are going to create, the same folder name is going to reflect in our apps, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a folder name known as UF forwarding app. So this particular app will be for the universal forwarders, which is going to forward the logs to heavy forwarders. I'm going to create a folder here called as local. Now I'm going to go inside that folder, and now we are going to create a file called outputs.conf, and I'm going to copy paste this particular configuration. That being done, now let's quickly create one more app. See, UF forwarding app is created now. So what we are going to do, we are going to create one more app known as HF forwarding app. So which will have the configuration for a happy forwarder to forward the logs to the indexer. So again, I'm going to create a configuration file called outputs.conf, and I'm going to paste this particular configuration. That being done, now what we have to do after all any changes done to the deployment server, we just need to reload the deployment server. We don't need to restart the complete server, complete Splunk. What we can do, just reload the deployment server. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to the bin folder, and I'm going to type here Splunk reload deploy server. So it is going to ask me authentication. You can provide the same credential what you have set. S- So reloading server classes, it has reloaded. Let's go back to our browser and see whether we are able to see those two apps or not. You see here, guys, I'm able to see those two apps, right? So these two apps I'm able to successfully see over here, right? So now our apps creation is completed. Now the next thing what we are going to do is we are going to create the server classes. Okay. So now coming to the server classes. So server classes are nothing but the it maps the configuration files with the systems, right? If I again say you, so suppose this particular UF forwarding app, right, what you see over here, HF forwarding app or UF forwarding app. So they are for the instances, right? So they are for the instances. Basically, the heavy forwarding app is for the heavy forwarding, and UF forwarding app is used for the universal forwarder. So basically, there should be again classes. So what will do? Classes will map to the apps and to the basically to the all the hosts which are to which we are going to deploy the apps basically. So that is what server class. So all these configurations will be present inside server class.conf file. So that is again a very important configuration file. Okay, server class.conf file where all the deployment procedures, everything are given over there. Okay, so if you see here, so this is the configurations of the deploy server class.conf file. So they have actually divided the configuration into basically three steps: first step, second step, and third step. That I'm going to explain you that right now. So first step, basically they have named it as a global level. Okay. Second step, so basically all the configuration what you will mention there, it will be applicable to everywhere. Okay. Second configuration is second level server class. So basically what you do here is you define a class name over here. Okay. So the third level is the app level. We call it the app level. So where you map a server class with the app name. Okay. So now coming to my configuration file. So as we said, so this is the first level, which is global. So the global properties will be defined here. So only one property is needed here, which we call is at repository location. So basically the repository location means where all the deployment apps what we have created, where it is present in the deployment server. So we saw, right, it is present inside the OPT Splunk ATC deployment apps. So that's what the repository location is. So that is our global. Okay, once that is done, now what we will do is we are going to mention the second level. So second level, as I said, it is a class level. Okay, so basically we created only two apps, but here we need three classes that I'm going to tell you why we need three classes. Okay, so as we have three servers and three servers are one is heavy forwarder. Okay, so one class for that, and two are universal forwarder. We could have used one single class for the same universal forwarders because we only have the one app, right? But the universal forwarders are in two different platforms. So one is in the Windows platform and one is in the Linux platform. So the configuration slightly changes in the Windows environment and the Linux environment. So that's why we have given it. So now, if you see here, the stanza will be like server class colon the class name what you have given. Okay, so I have mentioned the class name similar to my app name so that it will be easy for me to map it. Okay, so now if you see here, server class colon UF forwarding Linux class. So this means that I have created a class for the universal forwarder, and that is dedicated to the Linux environment, right? So now in the second server class I have created is UF forwarding Windows class. So this is for the Windows universal forwarder. And next is HF forwarding class. So basically, so this is for the heavy heavy forwarder forwarding. Okay, so these are my three classes. Now next what you see is whitelist 0, whitelist 0, whitelist 0. So this means that which all hosts are actually allowed to be a part of this particular class, right? So whitelist.0 mentions that whitelist.0. Okay, if you want to mention more IP address in this particular class, then you can do it like whitelist dot one equal to then the IP address what you want, you can give it here, right? So as of now I have only one IP address. Okay, so now I'm going to do it right now. So I will map the IP address or the host IP address to this particular thing. Okay, so as you see here, right, whitelist dot 0 is equal to 172.31.35.78, right? So now the thing is we have to see the UF forwarding Linux class. So which is the universal forwarder Linux that I want to map it to my this particular class. So this is the universal forwarder Linux environment, right? So I will just copy this IP address and I will paste it here. That being done, now we need the universal forwarding Windows class, right? If we go, if we- so okay, sorry, universal forwarder Windows is present in my machine itself. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy paste this, or I can just type it. I think it is not copy pastable, so I will do that here itself. 172.27.232.14. 232.14. So this is how you map it. Now the third is the HF forwarding class. So this is for the heavy forwarder which we have created, right? So let me select this heavy forwarder and copy the IP address of this particular heavy forwarder and paste it here. Okay, so right now what we did in the second level, we created the classes and we mapped it with the hosts. Now the third thing is we need to map the same classes with the applications, with all of the apps which it is going to send to this particular host, right? So same three classes, we need to define the same three, there will be same three parameters again. So if you see here, the syntax is server class, then the class name, right? We have forwarding Linux class, then the app colon app and the app name. So it is for the universal forwarders, right? So I'm going to mention UF forwarding app. Similarly, there is a class called HF forwarding class which we have created here. So again, I have mapped it with the app called HF forwarding app. And the third is UF forwarding Windows class, and I have forwarded it to the UF forwarding app, right? Once that is done, now there is one more app which we have created, right? If you see UF forwarding Windows class, and I have mentioned it the same apps because I want for both the Windows and Linux universal forwarders, I want them to have the same app because the configurations are same, right? Outputs.const is same, the same configuration file that needs to be pushed there. But the only thing that changes there is if you see here target repository locations, right? So target repository location means, so these are the properties of the server classes actually. So what that means that where this apps what you are going to push, where it is going to be is saved in the universal forwarders or the forwarders or the deployment clients basically, so where that it is going to be stored. So that means that that is the target repository locations. So I think now you'll be able to understand why we need to create three different classes, because for the view of forwarding there is Linux and Windows, and for the Linux and Windows the paths changes, right? So if you see here, it will Splunk the C colon, it is backslash, right? But in Linux file directory it will be front slash. So that is the change, right? So that is the thing you need to note here. That's why we have created. Now the rest too is restart Splunk D. Like whenever an app is created, right, in order to for the configurations to be applied, we need to restart the Splunk. So once you deploy it, it will understand this and it is going to restart the Splunk service on the that particular host. And state on client is equal to enable. That means that and on that particular basically server, the this app should be enabled or disabled. Okay, or basically on the deployment client this should be enabled or disabled. Hope so it is understood now in this particular configuration files. If you are still having some doubts, what you can do is you can go here and go to the serverclass.conf file and you can read about those particular things and you'll be getting more clear about it. Okay. So that is everything right now. Right. So guys, one small change actually, I need to change the IP address here. So the Windows IP address is slightly different. Actually, it is happening because of the NATing. We are able to see one separate IP address here and a separate IP address reporting over there. That is because of the NATing that is happening by the OpenVPN server. Okay, so that is being done now. So what we are going to do? So now I'll go back to my deployment server. I'm going to my OPT Splunk etc system local. If I do an ls, right, so there is no server class.conf file, right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create that server class.conf file here, nano server class.conf. Okay, so same configuration what you have created, just copy paste everything and paste it here, right? Just verify everything. Once that is done, now what you need to do, any changes in the, as I already said, any changes in the deployment server, you need to just reload the deployment server. Okay, opt splunk bin. Now dot backslash splunk reload deploy server. It's done now. So let me get back to the console. Now you see, right, there are 0 server classes. If I reload now, right, if you see here, there are 3 server classes, right? So HF forwarding class, UF forwarding Linux class, and UF forwarding Windows class. So if you see here are apps as well, right? One apps. So if you want to see what app is being deployed here, you can click on here, or basically you can go back, not from there as well. It is used for editing. So HF forwarding class, and you can see what is the app being deployed to that particular class, right? So that is it is showing right now. Okay, what is the, you can by clicking on that class you can see it, right? So every other details you can see it here. If you see here, if you click on that particular class, you will be saying what is the app that is being that is deployed that particular and also what is the client through to which we have deployed it. Okay, so everything you'll be able to see in the GUI format as well, right? So now if you see here, our apps has been deployed to the 3 clients as well, and there are 0 errors, right? If we go back to the clients, we also see here one apps is deployed. So how do we confirm that whether the apps are deployed or not successfully? So you remember, right? While doing the same thing, we were giving the target repository location, the location where the app should be deployed, right? So we are going to check one by one, and we are going to see whether these particular apps are being deployed here or not. Okay, so let me start with this universal forwarder, right? So I'm going to check the same thing. So what for checking that, what you need to do is, so I'm going to SSH into my universal forwarder first, then my heavy forwarder, then my Windows machine. So one by one, we'll check it everywhere. So let's first start with our, okay, fine. We can start with our heavy forwarder itself. Okay, okay, let's become root. Okay, let me go Splunk etc. If you remember here, the path was, it's for the heavy forwarding, right? It is inside the apps. So let us see. Now, if I do a quick ls, let us search for that app. Diag. Okay, guys, see here. HF forwarding app. If you see here, that particular app is deployed in this particular heavy forwarder, right? If I go into that particular app as well, that same configuration file that we did in the same configuration that we did on our from the deployment server, we have successfully able to push that particular app to our uh, heavy forwarder as well, right? So let's confirm that in our universal forwarder as well, if it is deployed or not. So coming back to my universal forwarder now. Okay, so same here, it is deployed at, let me see. You see here, guys, UF forwarding app, right? So that app is even deployed here. If I go to that particular path, UF forwarding app slash local, and if I do cat, let me do ls first, you see that output zconf that we have created, it is successfully here, right? So it also mentions right where it needs to forward its logs. So that is being done now. Now let's check whether the same app is even deployed in our in our Windows machine as well. So for that, go to your C drive, program files, Splunk Universal Forwarder, etc, apps. Now, if you see here, guys, that app is even deployed here as well, right? So if you go inside that local, and you'll be able to see the configuration file here as well. So as I said, so guys, this is about the deployment server, how we configure the deployment server, and how the deployment server is going to push apps, and how we configure it. We configure the apps basically. Let me go back to my console and show you once again. So this is actually the complete path of the for deployment server, where you'll be able to see your clients, your server classes, your apps, everything. So basically, the clients, what you're reporting, that is that is only to be done in that way I said. But this apps and server classes, what we did, right, guys, apps should be also be done in that way only. But the server classes what I created, right, the server class.conf, everything what I created, that can be even created from here as well, right? So you don't need to create a full detailed server class.conf configuration file that we did that I did right now. We don't need that particular path. Basically, let me get back to my document. If you see here, so basically deployment client setup, that needs to be done in this way. Creation of apps, these two things needs to be done as the way I showed, but this complete thing needs not to be done from the we can do it from the here itself. So let me create and show you test class. So if you create it, you can add your apps here, right? So what we were doing, you remember, right? We created a class. If we see here, so we create class here, and then we put the clients here in the third level, then we put the apps here. Same thing you can do it here as well. You can click on add apps, and you can add the whatever apps you want here. See, you two apps, if I want to add this particular app, you can click on that, and you can click on save, right? Even you can add clients like whatever client you want, and you can click on that particular client, and you can just select that particular client, or basically you can copy paste the IP address and put it here, and it will be getting, and save it, it will be getting added. So basically you don't need to do it from the configuration, you can do it from the UI itself. So these are the two ways the you can do it. Okay, I am not going to do that because otherwise two times it is going to do that. And okay, so I'm going to delete this particular class as I don't need it. So this is how we do it for the deployment servers, guys. So our forwarding tier is completely configured now. Now I will show you in our next session like how do we configure the complete indexes and cluster mastering stuff.